Thank you, Anita. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm head of product and sales engineering at Throughput. I've been with the company for 3 years and have had a chance to deploy our solution in many different verticals, from retail and distribution to heavy industrial manufacturing process flows. So with that, the focus of today's presentation, as well as what I want to focus on throughout this conversation, is how to create that sustainable advantage for your business. Focus can be our superpower, but where we deploy it and how much of that focus we have will really set the stage for how successful we can execute, right? So let's talk about more of a high level what everyone really goes through in their planning process, right? So our senior leaders and CXOs set the course with setting high level organizational targets that we need to achieve. When this happens, the actual management on the functional level starts aligning those targets with the possibility to execute around them and creating that plan of action. Then the time comes to set those plans into action, in motion, and things start changing. When we need to really dynamically look at what the execution results are and pivot in such a way that we can continue striving to meet our goals, right? But the impact of variability in that journey is very important. Knowing what parts of your system are stable and can be effectively planned against, or where challenges happen to an extent that you do not have that stability in place, and how much buffer in the operation to bake in to really respond to the level of variability present is the art of its own. And throughout this presentation, what I want to focus you on is how Throughput thinks about those problem statements, and what we've baked in our thinking process and the platform that we offer as a result to help our customers tackle those challenges effectively. So tangled material flows is what results from not being able to respond to variability effectively and to those changing targets in a way, right? That ultimately leads us to having unexpected business results. How we can tackle those challenges is, well, what drives the root cause is the wrong inputs, right? Traditionally, our systems are designed to have one number for expectation of a lead time from supplier for how long it will take for us to get the order in, or but in reality, it should be a range, right? Same goes for expectations that we set on demand, or our ability to produce something if we are in manufacturing business. There is a intrinsic variability in all the steps in the chain. And so what we feed into the system determines how fast the material can flow through all the steps to get to that value creation that we seek for our customers as well as for our bottom line. The wrong inputs also result in the undershooting and overshooting on availability of our product at the end of the day. As an example, the global, local, mainstream, or niche clothing manufacturers or retailers have about 12% of clothing that remains unsold at the end of each season, which results in 180 billion worth of sales wasted and working capital spent that's tied up in the system not being able to be freed up to drive positive results for the rest of the business. So with overstocking and like overshooting, what happens is our pipes in the supply chain that we manage gets filled with the wrong products. And downstream effect of that is the right products do not have space to really go through those bottlenecks that we've created by overproducing or overstocking or overusing the equipment that we have, and slows down the process for us to effectively move the products that our customers need to the place where they can actually get it. Ultimately, all of this can be quantified in terms of waste. The machines that have been utilized to produce the wrong product, their utilization is the time at the machine spent, cost money for our businesses. The warehouse space that is used for stocking the products that are not turning around that fast slows us down, and it's both the impact to the logistics spend that we incurred in order to bring that material in the first place to this warehouse, as well as the space that is utilized on a slow-moving part of the inventory, and the investment that we have ultimately spent to actually procure that inventory that's sitting around on our shelves are all the ways that we see that are very easy to translate into the financial terms. And that's one of the first things that our platform highlights quite effectively. That same waste can be also translated into an environmental effect of using the energy or generating excess CO2 emissions along the way to maintain this material in the wrong places, and then shuffling it around. So a powerful example that I like from McKinsey report from 2021, but still quite relevant, is how does not having the right product at the right place at the right time impact the business and the loyalty factor of our customers, right? So during the shakeups and supply chain disruptions and the midst of pandemic, what was observed is a very interesting stat, right? So over 60% of US customers have experienced an out of stock event in the span of 3 months analyzed by McKinsey in this report. 13% of those customers that didn't get the product they wanted in the first place waited for them to come back. So they were loyal enough to stick around and give back to their loyalty to the business, waiting for the product. 39% switched the brands or products. So there was a substitute that was offered on the same platform or within the same store to the customer. So the customer wasn't lost, but then they got to try something new for themselves that maybe they liked it. The 32% that switched retailers completely is the detrimental loss that can be experienced from not being able to prioritize which products to stock for effectively, because that customer walked away from your business in this situation. So the same insight leads us to really reprioritize how we look at the portfolio, the dynamic supply chain portfolio rationalization. There are 3 focus areas that could really help businesses move the needle and make sure they focus on the right things. So accelerating their shift towards demand-led model is one of the top priorities that still is the focusing area. Reduction of assortment complexity. So what that means is really looking at your portfolio of the products that or services that you offer to the market, and understanding which are the products that are not really added value to the overall portfolio, and how dynamically it changes across from one period to another. So in a lot of cases with our clients, especially in retail and distribution sector, we see that the top 5 contributors to the bottom line performance from the contribution margin are not the same across the year, which means that you need to have different priorities and service level expectations set for those products when those top 3% changes. And finally, addressing the recalibration of price volume equation, right? So whether you drive up demand with promotions or other methods where it impacts the number of products and units that you end up selling, how does it correlate to the costs that are incurred to perform that sale, and whether the margins are really adequate to continue supporting this product mix in the shape and form that it is provided right now. So how do we achieve flow? Creating, as we set the priority on understanding demand and the difference in how we need to prioritize our product mix or geographic representation of products and services offered. How do we create the pool and align network execution strategy to those demand priorities, right? Understanding what the system is capable of in terms of supporting, like how much space is available in the warehouse. Do you have an extended way to expand and construct that space on need-by basis when the market shifts and demands it, or does your production capacity can expand and contract on need-by basis to support those shifting demand priorities, is something that dynamically needs to be assessed, right? So one aspect is that we look at is moving away from the paradigm from the supply chains that are looked at as static, inflexible, linear supply chain models, to really treating our supply chain as a spring with dynamic, interconnected, multimodal, and elastic networks being in play that are constantly analyzed and evaluated for what they can support and how to really pivot using what you have effectively to support the demand priorities that you also dynamically reassess. One important aspect that I also wanted to spend time on, and it was very important for us when we were designing, when we designed our platform, is precision for where is your leverage point, right? So precision is really needed only at the system constraint. So understanding where it is part of the puzzle, whether it's your markets or your actual operations capacity, capability, or is it your supply, is helping us understand what to orient and to how to orient all the supporting functions in your organization to leverage it, that constraint to your advantage. When we don't solve for that equation correctly, what happens is we create pileups because we optimize the places in the system that do not need that optimization, because we have sort of a narrow area that will constrain the flow of material and financial flow somewhere else in the system. So I will focus right now on where AI can help and how in our solution, where we put that effort to really make sure we can create an effective plan of action for our customers to not only create robust and responsive system that helps create that competitive advantage for their business, but also understand where are the places in that supply chain that creating more resilient approach or investment in more resilience will really pay off. So we start with the inputs. In our platform, we really try to answer the question of what is the reality of things that comes from ingesting the data that is descriptive of your day-to-day transactions, transactional data like sales, purchase orders, internal material flow, material movement data, and financial flows associated with that helps us evaluate the current state of an operation, understand where waste is accumulating given the current targets and the current execution practices. That's the first step. It's probably more aligned to analytics rather than AI at this stage, but what it helps us do is also take that reality and dynamically recalibrate those targets, where the emphasis are on learning your market and operations realities and understanding also that aspect of variability and the second, the next question in the logical thing set of things is that we answer is what can you do now with the current within the current capability and within the level of uncertainty that is present in your supply chain as a network, as a system. So we focus on evaluating where improvements are possible and embedded aid to root cause why the reasons for failures in different cases. Here we focus on the demand side, on understanding the trends on the contribution margin down to the product and location level, understanding what is the ability to support the demand from the assessment of key metrics like on time and full performance, as well as on shelf availability to really see whether the demand is reflected correctly, knowing what was offered at the end of the day to the client, right? And linking it to operations ability to support that demand, looking at how inventory levels have been supporting that on-shelf availability, what production capacity is available to support the demand levels that we need. And then ultimately ranking those improvement opportunities for our clients to focus on low-hanging fruit and the priorities approach on which improvements you can implement today in order to really achieve the bottom line effect on the company level goals and not looking at the improvements from the siloed functional area improvement standpoint. Lastly, we focus on what is possible aspect of things, right? So creating within the given constraints that we've analyzed and the level of uncertainty present, how do we create a new plan, right? The optimized execution recommendations, factoring in the current state of the operation, and ultimately leading our clients to understand where if a certain aspect of variability or performance is improved, how much impact it will generate for the entire organization. So I think with that, I'll shift the focus to how do we start. But just to wrap up my thought, I think we've reviewed the various aspects of uncertainty and how to manage your plans in a much more dynamic fashion. Yeah, and that's the kind of thinking process that we've embedded in our platform. So although we haven't really looked at a demo of the platform and kind of how we do what we do, if you're interested in the approach, the next steps will highlight how do we start the next conversation. Anita, would you like me to cover that, or?
Yeah, sure, Ala. You can just highlight a little bit, and then we can move on to the Q&A.
Sure. So usually what you need is find an executive sponsor, board member or C-suite executive. Generally, a CFO is most interested in the outcomes of really supply chain intervention from our platform side on our engagement. Second step would be to pick something measurable that where the impact would be sizable in terms of your either distribution center or part of a product line that we can do proof of concept on. So provide the material flow related data, sales data, inputs to our platform. And we have integrations designed to speed up that data exchange part. And then third, we would get to showcasing the results on your business in our platform so that you know exact ROI to expect from the continuous engagement. Thank you so much for your attention. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Ala, for the informative session. I hope it was useful for the audience. Just a reminder, we will take a couple of questions, and you can submit your questions in the Q&A pane at the bottom right. We already have a few questions, so we will get started with that. At any point in time, if you would like to raise a hand, please submit them in the Q&A pane. If you're not able to cover all the questions, we would try to respond to them via email. Let's get started with the first one. Do you think demand sensing will pay out better in 2023, given the inflation and economic uncertainty?
Of course, that the priority of demand sensing, I think, doesn't change. And what we've seen also is, I think at the beginning of pandemic, where basically all the forecasts went through the window for a lot of businesses, what we've seen now is that you can actually extract quite meaningful information from even the 3 last years of kind of market adjustment. And although the shakeups resulted in unpredictable outcomes for our demand, in some cases, now those shakeups resulted in new behaviors that are quite consistent for our customers, right? So going back to that slide where I mentioned like 36 or the 30-ish% of customers that didn't get their product got to try something new or shift to another, another product mix maybe as a substitute, right? Resulted in, some consistent behaviors that stuck around. And the scientific approach to extract those new trends in a dynamic fashion and bubble up the important parts of it to for review is very impactful. So, yes.
This is a good one, and it is so timely, given that we just had a recent Black Friday and all the massive discounts and sales that everyone's experiencing everywhere. What is your recommendation for the current inventory overstocking problem that most retailers are facing now? What do you think is the root cause, and what could have actually been done to avoid the scenario that invariably the biggest of the retailers are experiencing right now?
Mm-hmm. It's a tough question to answer. I think there is something. Well, I read an article recently about. I'll try to put it in the right words, but basically, it was something around using the customer like a sponge, like squeezing too much. You can't squeeze the sponge more than what it like the amount of liquid that it maintains. So having more realistic expectations of what you as a business is able to cover in terms of demand is very important, right? So there's not unlimited supply that you can bring in to turn around that sale, and aligning what you've got to what you can promise to your customers is very important, because a lot of times what happens is people over committed their orders, especially on their e-commerce platforms, and when they went back to their suppliers and said, well, now give me the next batch, I don't have it in my warehouse, the lead times were quite extensive to really bring that product to the customer, and so that results into unmet expectations, right? And rather than doing that, I'd focus on aligning the realistic expectations with what the customer is promised with.
The next question is a bit around data, and this is something that we often hear from most of our clients, and also a lot of the conversations that we have with even analysts in general. How much data is required to get started? And typically, most companies have a lot of data quality issues, or they are currently undergoing some sort of a data transformation or a data lake transformation exercise, or they are in the midst of it, or they're considering it. Um, if you can elaborate on the minimal amount of data that can help you get started with, that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So it really depends on the topic, but essentially for demand, if our goal is to pick up on variability in seasonality, cyclicality, we do need the 2-3 years worth of data, historical data, to really pick up on those insights. But we also have customers that they started the business quite recently, so they don't have that history available to them, and part of the history is also associated with the ramp up of their operation, which is not the latest consistent demand that they're seeing, right? So even in those situations, a year worth of data, for example, is already sufficient to start picking up on variability across the week. What are the what is the responsiveness of the market to various events that you're driving, let's say from your marketing efforts on promotions and various price adjustments and so forth. So that's a continuous learning process for our platform. And although the starting point may be not sufficient to answer all the questions, as you sort of add new history to it every day, the platform would respond more favorably with the extended data set. On other aspects of the operation, let's say inventory management, you don't really need to go that far with the 3 years of historical data. You can start with more recent, year worth of inventory level practices to really understand what is the spend associated with inventory, whether it was allocated adequately across the year, and pick up on the insight on where opportunities for improvement are needed because of the practices in place.
Can you talk a bit about the algorithms used in the product?
Well, to an extent, our platform is configurable to a use case. We have left a certain level of flexibility where we can swap the method to match more of a need for a given vertical, a given industry where we are deploying the solution. But essentially, we've put a lot of effort to making the machine learning and AI functionality on the demand sensing side, and then we are leveraging various methods to understand the bottleneck detection, for example, is something that's very key to material flow and production capabilities for our manufacturing side clients. So those are the areas where we've put a lot of effort to strengthen our understanding and extraction of insights from the data. And lastly, we focus a lot on applying the methods to understand where the outlier behavior is present, and that aspect of analysis of the variability in the system. That's pretty much deployed across the board in our platform, regardless of which part of the functional supply chain that you're looking at, whether it's demand, inventory, production, logistics, or supplier variability.
Got it. We'll take one last question now. What are the drawbacks of the current ways in which supply chains are being managed using existing supply chain platforms? Where do you see the difference that a product like yours could bring? Also, supply chains have gained a lot of prominence post the pandemic. Would love to understand how is your philosophy different from existing supply chain platforms?
Yeah, great question, by the way. So our execution systems are quite static in the way that they help orchestrate the day-to-day operation. So that's one thing that drove us to build a product the way that we did differently. The aspect of treatment of the supply chain as a static, requiring static input into the planning is what we focus on breaking and really looking at all the inputs being assessed dynamically, whether it's your supply chain lead time for procurement, or ability to bring the right level of inventory to the right place, or for your production capacity to execute against a certain mix of product in a given time. Those are the aspects that we continuously evaluate. What is the feasibility of each of these components of your supply chain to respond to the need? That makes our recommendation more realistic to execute against. The other aspect that is different is there are, taking the execution systems aside, there are two kind of big avenues which help in better planning or what if analysis, right? So there are simulation tools, and those are great. They can produce a lot of different scenarios for you, but that's in a lot of cases overwhelming amount of data crunching that is done to come up to the kind of output as a plan that you can pick from. So instead of doing that, and that also requires people who know how to set up the problem statement, how to use those tools. We focused on making this go away, right? So while fixing the inputs to make sure that the inputs that are going into the model and the optimization are more dynamic and more aligned with your real capabilities of your business to execute. We also don't build in that complexity of setup to have a subject matter expert that knows how to work the tool, right? And has to have certificates to really set that up. So that aspect of the setups and complexity of running this optimization platforms is removed completely from our platform. So you get to the results and options much quicker.
You mean time to value was much faster compared to traditional systems, which are quite complex, to a large extent siloed, and also kind of not very collaborative. Let's put it that way. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ala, so much for your time and for the great effort in putting together a fantastic presentation for us. I hope this was useful for the audience and they found something informative and had some key takeaways that they could leverage with their teams for broader discussions. As Ala said, you can reach out to her or me at the email IDs listed below. I hope you have a good day, and we look forward to continuing our education series around supply chains in 2023 as well. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.